All right, hi everyone. This is going to be the lecture over Chapter 2's material. Chapter 2 is about competitiveness, strategy, and productivity. As a reminder, in case you didn't catch this last week, these lectures are going to cover the highlights from the publisher's PowerPoints, but I trimmed them down. I think this one originally was 41 slides. I've got it down to 25 or 26 for this video, just to make sure we can keep the time under half an hour. I don't want to go much longer than that for you guys. So, keep in mind when you're studying for the chapter quizzes, anything in the chapter is fair game. I would recommend, you open up the full PowerPoint. I do upload that for your use, and then make sure you have the full chapter reviewed before you take your quizzes. So we're going to focus on primarily productivity as far as the quantitative elements this week. So when you do your problem sets from Chapter 2, they're going to all be revolving around productivity and measurements of productivity, ways to quantify it. And then competitiveness and strategy are going to come into play as far as just the general theory of those things, how those concepts need to be understood in order for you to really grasp their role in business, and then also do well on the quiz because you'll understand it. So here's the learning objectives for Chapter 2. Again, not all of these are going to be covered in this lecture. I did take out some of the slides from this to get the time down. So let's start on the focus. The focus is on competitiveness, strategy, and productivity. Three ideas that are separate, however, very related and integral to your business. So the first one was competitiveness. And then competitiveness is just, how well are you meeting your customers' needs compared to other people? If I'm a gas station and I offer a lower price per gallon than somebody else, maybe that's a competitive edge that I have. If I can offer, if I'm Quick Trip and I offer what appears to be a safer environment with bright lights and maybe security or police on hand to protect customers late at night, or whatever the case is, maybe that's a competitive advantage that I have. So it's any combination of marketing and operations that helps determine what do customers actually want and how can we satisfy those needs in order to gain an edge on our competition. In the operations department, so discounting marketing, your book talks more about the marketing elements of competing, but this is an operations class. And so the operations can compete by having better designed products or services, lower cost, better location, where you locate compared to somebody else is a competitive edge, better quality, how responsive you are. And then the last step in here is your managers and workers. We have the staff, the human capital, an element involved in our business that helps us do our business better than others. Reasons why an organization might fail. Some of those reasons include neglecting your overall operation strategy, not taking advantage of the strengths and opportunities you have, or failing to recognize competitive strengths or competitive threats rather. So, if you're a Blockbuster in the late 90s, early 2000s, you think that you have nothing but the strength dominating the video rental market. Along comes Netflix, and you don't realize just how much of a competitive threat they actually are, and now you don't exist, and they're number one in that market, right? Focusing on short-term financial performance instead of investing in your research and development. This is a long-term technology increases that help you perform better over time, and not just in the short term where you might get left behind. Failing to establish good internal communications and cooperation. If you don't have buy-in from your team, and you don't have good morale, and you aren't involving your team members, then they're going to look for places and leave and go somewhere that does give them that feeling, that sense of cooperation and teamwork, right? In the hierarchy of a company, and you're planning from the ground up and top down, you've got your mission. That's your overall reason for why you exist. That's at the very top. And then down the road, you have your goals of the organization, goals of various functions within your organization. So finance has a strategy on how it's going to get those goals met. Marketing, operations team, those three main parts of the company, they all have their own strategies on how they're going to meet those goals, their long-term thinking and ways they're going to achieve them, their tactics and their operating procedures within those three main functions. And, you know, other functions of the company also exist, right? You know, your IT team, all right, and human resources, they also exist. But these are the three main functions within the company. So mission, like I said, that's the reason why you exist. Some examples of a mission statement would be, Microsoft's is to help people and businesses throughout the world realize their full potential. Starbucks, to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one cup and one neighborhood at a time, right? So you have a mission statement. The why do we exist as a company? Goals are the what are you trying to actually achieve? So a detailed scope of the mission. How are we going to actually quantify that we've met our mission as a company? And we use our statement, our mission statement, as the basis for setting those goals. If we're going to achieve those goals, it's going to take strategy, and it's going to take tactics, and it's going to take operational efficiency and operational performance. So strategy first, that's the plan for how we're going to achieve it. That's the roadmap, right? So you have an organizational strategy, that's the overall strategy, and then within the various functions, they have their own strategies on how they're going to achieve those goals. Different from strategy is tactics. This is the actual how-to, the actual doing part. So this is the nitty-gritty details of how we're going to achieve that. Often you might think of strategy as the long-term, and then tactics as the intermediate term. These steps is what we're going to take. And then operations is the actual doing it. So operations being your day-to-day. How are we actually achieving our part of the process to contribute to those goals? Core competencies are something within an organization that gives them an edge. What do we do better than somebody else? What specific thing? Aligning our core competencies with our strategies helps you be effective as an organization. So if you're McDonald's, your core competency is getting food out fast, hot, ready to go, getting a lot of people through the queue. That might be something you're competent at compared to other fast food that aren't as competent as at getting customers through a queue, right? If you go to Five Guys, you might get a better burger than McDonald's, better fries than McDonald's, but they're not going to get that out fast. You're not going to get in and out in under 5 minutes, right? So here's some example operations strategies. So if you're going to be a low price as a strategy for operations point of view, you need to be low cost. So if you're going to have a low price as your organizational strategy, then your operations has to keep your costs low as well. So some examples would be Walmart, right? They have low prices, and as an operations team, they keep their prices low by, whether it's not putting as much money into the actual product, right? Or it's keeping their overhead low by cutting back on their hours. None of the Walmarts are 24 hours anymore, maybe some parts of the country, but certainly not in Oklahoma. Keeping their salaries low, unfortunately. If your organizational strategy is to have a differentiation strategy, there's various types of differentiation strategies, being newer than everyone else, offering a lot of variety, offering better service, or just having a better location. So newness would be how's operations going to achieve that strategy? They're going to innovate. So 3M and Apple are examples there. Variety, you need to have flexibility and get out a lot of volume if you're going to have a lot of different good items. Burger King, have it your way. I don't think they use this slogan anymore. But that was a slogan. I don't even remember buses welcome McDonald's. I'm sure it was probably on the sign. I'm kind of vaguely remembering it being on the big sign on the at the start of the parking lot, perhaps. Superior customer service, Disneyland, Disney World. I got engaged at Disney World, and man, at some point I broke away from my now wife in the park under the guise of running the restroom, and I went to the customer service and I said, "Hey, I'm going to propose at this place at this time," and they had people out there with cameras. They came and gave us these big buttons congratulating us for getting engaged, and gave us tickets to stay in the park, or wristbands to stay in the park after they closed. We weren't staying at a hotel at the park, but if you stay at the hotel at the park, they let you stay like 2 hours after the normal park hours. So we got to do that, and they just, great time. They're all employees at Disney World. They call them cast members because, right, you're basically it's you go there for the experience, and everybody's playing their part to make sure you have that experience. And for all the downside you might say about Disney, they do an outstanding job of customer service. All right. So some decision areas you have within operations management to achieve your strategies. You've got decisions in product and service design. You've got to decide what are your costs going to be, quality, think about environmental and liability issues. Decision area, location. How much is the cost going to be in this location, but how much is the visibility there going to improve your outcomes? Scheduling. Do you need to have flexibility and efficiency in scheduling of your employees? If you're looking at quality-based strategies, so if your strategy has to do with quality, then you need to pursue a strategy based on overcoming a poor quality reputation. So maybe you had the viewpoint that your stuff wasn't working well. You're overcoming that. So we talked about Apple on the differentiation strategy, but Apple had an issue with batteries not lasting, and that resulting in poor output of your iPhone processing power. It was limited if the battery performance was down. So, one thing they did there was not this year, but I think it was in 2021, they lowered the price of battery replacement down to like $20. And then, really for that price, it's extended the life of my iPhone XS. It's going on 5 years now it's been out. Desire to maintain a quality image. So if your whole goal is to just have a quality image and maintain it, then you take steps to maintain that. Good guest service does that. Charitable donations does that. Good PR work, right? Time-based strategies, they focus on reducing the amount of time required to accomplish tasks. So this is efficiency. If you can do the same amount of work in less time, then you're being efficient. It's believed that by reducing time, your costs are lower. Generally, that's probably true. Quality is higher, not necessarily, but it could be. Productivity is higher, certainly. And customer service is improved most of the time, unless people are working so fast that they aren't delivering good customer service on the service side of things, right? Time-based strategies, so areas where organizations have achieved time reduction. So if you can process things faster, change over between shifts, between parts faster, deliver faster, respond faster to customers' complaints. Excellent. All right, we talked about efficiency. Productivity is slightly different than efficiency in that it is expressed, it's how effective you are using your resources. However, you're looking at, when you're measuring productivity over time, you're looking at how much did you produce in a given time period, right? So how many per hour, per day, per week would be a way you're measuring productivity, versus efficiency is the same amount of production in less time, okay? So slight difference there as far as the terminology goes. But productivity is useful for measuring your performance over time, and then judging the performance of an entire industry or country. So how well the industry is doing, and your productivity compared to others within the industry. I don't remember if I said this just now, but it's expressed as a ratio. So usually, a small number that is a ratio of output to input. Okay. Why does productivity matters? In general, being productive is linked to higher standards of living. We are more and more replacing manufacturing jobs because of robotics or automation with lower productivity service jobs. And in service industry, it's a lot more difficult to, maintain those high standards of living. When you're being very productive and you're manufacturing, you're investing a lot of money into that, you get these advancements in technology over time that lead to either higher pay or easier living, right? We invest a lot of money into technology, and it's brought us, some extraordinary things. There's a show, if you've watched it, on Apple TV called For All Mankind, and it's an alternative history show wherein the United States lost the race to had the first person on the moon, to the USSR, and the idea that if we continued investing money into the technology needed for advancement to space, we'd see all these things like electric vehicles in the late 80s and smartphones in the early 90s, and these things that we would have got faster because we're investing into them, into being productive, into being innovating and all that. Whereas we got to the moon and said, okay, we'll do a couple more times and then we're good. All right, for an entire industry, high relative productivity makes it less likely that you will be supplanted by a foreign industry. So a lot of industries, if we can do them productive here and the costs are low and profits are good, then it's less likely that we will offload those jobs overseas and outsource them to other companies or countries. We can measure productivity by comparing output to input. If you divide your entire output by all your input, you get productivity. And you can measure single parts of productivity. So output divided by a single input, example would be output divided by labor, or output divided by how much capital you've invested into that much output. You could also measure based on several factors. So output divided by multiple inputs. So this could be output divided by labor plus machine cost, or output divided by labor plus capital plus energy costs, right? So you can add multi-factors into the productivity measurements. So example, a total measurement would be how many goods did you produce divided by all inputs used to produce that amount of goods. Examples of partial productivity measures. So you could measure labor productivity, how many units of output per labor hour, how many units of output for every shift. That could be, an 8-hour shift or however many hours the shift is, as long as it's the standard time of each shift. Machine productivity, how many units per machine hour. Capital, how much units per dollar input. Energy productivity, how much units of output per kilowatt hour. So different things you can measure productivity in. Here's an example productivity. And this is a multi-factor case. If we produce 5,000 units at a cost of $30 per unit, so that's the cost of, price. Price is not cost. Price is how much we're selling it at. It looks to be standard price. Oh, that would be that's going to be the cost, material cost, right? No, cost per materials. There we go, 5,000. So the price isn't important in this one. 5,000 units we make, labor, 500 hours of labor, $25 per hour. Cost of overhead is whatever the labor is times 2. So overhead costs are typically listed as a multiplier, overhead multiplier. It might be overhead is estimated to be exactly the cost of labor again, or it might be 1.5 or 1.25. It's 2 times in this case. and the total cost of materials is 5,000. So we actually ignore standard price in this example. If we were to try to figure out what the multi-factor productivity is, we would want to actually, I guess for units produced, because we're given a price, we could measure how much we sold them for, right? So let's do the math on this. We've got 5,000 units, and we sold those 5,000 for $30 a unit. So that's our output. Our output is 30 times 5,000, so that's going to be $150,000 worth of sold goods, right? $150,000 worth of revenue. All right, so 150,000 on top, and then on the bottom we're going to have 500 hours of labor at $25 an hour. So we have 500 times 25. Okay, so that's 12,500. I think. Oops. $12,500. Okay, really hard to write with a pen sometimes, or with a mouse. 12,500 for labor. Plus we've got 2 times the labor cost for overhead. So if labor is 12,500, then our overhead is going to be 2 times 12,500, so 25,000. And then our cost of materials is going to be 5,000. Okay, so this is multi-factors. We've got $150,000 worth of output. That's how much revenue we brought in, and our inputs are going to be our costs. So our costs are going to be 25,000 plus 12,500 plus 5,000. So let's do this one first. 25 and 5,000 is 30,000. 30,000 plus 12,500 is 42,500. So we've got 150,000 worth of output, and we divide that by 42,500 worth of input. That's going to come out to 3.5 something, right? Don't want to pull up a calculator, but 3.5 something. I think it's actually on the next slide. So that's the multi-factor productivity, and I think it's going to actually tell us here. Yes, okay. So we've got output divided by labor, material, and overhead. 5,000 times 30 is 150,000, and then we have 500 hours at $25 an hour plus $5,000 worth of material plus 2 times our labor. If our labor was 12,500, then our overhead is 25,000. Add it all together, we've got $150,000 worth of output, which is our revenue, divided by 42,500 worth of cost, which equals 3.5294. And what's the implication of a unitless measurement of productivity? What does this tell us? On its own, in a bubble, what does this tell us? Nothing. It tells us absolutely nothing, because it's only relative if we compare it to something else. We can look at the growth in productivity. If it was 3.5294 this month, what was last month's? Now it tells us something. It tells us, did productivity go up or go down? On its own, 3.5, is that good? Is it bad? I have no idea, because everything's relative, right? Is a person tall or short? Compared to what, right? Numbers don't mean anything unless they're compared to something else. So we can look at measurement of productivity over time. We can do that as a productivity growth or it going up or down, right? So this example, we've got 25 units per hour in 2014, but then 2015, we only made 23 units per hour. How much was the productivity growth? Well, it's going to be a negative. We know that right away because it went down from 25 to 23. So we take current minus previous, and in that case, it's going to be a negative value. So it's going to be -2 over the previous. So we look at the previous, and we take the difference between this year or this period and last period, which is -2, and divide it by last period. And we can see how much did that go up or down over time. So -2 divided by 25 is going to be 0.08, negative 0.08. And then the times 100. So let me just throw this out here right now. This times 100 is a way to just make this decimal point shift 2 spots. That's why it's times 100. So 0.08, you move it once, you move it twice, and that tells you what the percentage is. Okay. This kind of looks like a wonky cat face as an aside, if you look at that whiskers. Anyway, you move the decimal point 2 times 100. There's a 0 and a 0. Every 0 is moving the decimal place one time. So that's why your book has this in there, to show you how you change a decimal point to a percentage. Now, when you are doing your formulas in your Excel work and you're looking at this as a percentage, you don't do that. Don't multiply by 100 to get the percentage. Instead, just go to the formatting and then change it to a percentage. So if it says 0.08, change the formatting to a percentage and it'll change it to 8%. Because what'll happen is if you multiply by 100 and then change it to a percentage, you end up with 8. It would say 80% instead, I think, for shifting it twice, or 800%. I forget. It gets off because it would look like it said 8, and then you change it to 100, and that looks like 800%, right? And that's not what it is. You don't want it to say 800%. You want it to say 8%. So in Excel, you just change the formatting to a percentage. Don't multiply by 100 in Excel, okay? And that's true for almost every formula in this book. Your book shows you the times 100 at the end of it, just to change it from a decimal point display to a percentage display. All right. On your quiz, you do have some quantitative work and anything involving a percentage. However you arrive at that, you can multiply by 100 to change it to a percentage on your calculator, however you need to do it. If you want to visualize and see 0.08, but I ask you on the quiz to write everything as a percentage in that method. So if it's 8.5%, you're just going to write 8.5, and that's it. Whereas on your calculator, you're going to arrive at 0.085. So do the translation however you need to do. Just in Excel, just change the format. All right. That aside, last couple slides here. First one being, how do you measure service sector productivity? That's tough. There's a lot of variability. How productive somebody's being is really hard to measure. Sometimes you can measure productivity based on the process yield. So good products to quantity of raw material input, right? So how many items did they make in order to measure their productivity, right? That's in goods. But if you're looking at service sector, it's hard. It requires services, how productive is somebody being at serving food at a restaurant, right? Could you look at how many items were ordered? Well, items per person, maybe if you judge based on upselling or total ticket cost, were they upselling drinks or appetizers or desserts? That's possible, but how well was the service delivered, right? You're still looking at goods in that case. So there's a lot of variability, and often service sector productivity relies on evaluation, observation, and surveys from customers, et cetera. So hard to measure that way. Looking at a ratio of goods produced to amount of raw materials is one way to measure productivity in terms of goods. In where services are involved, using process yield helps you because it turns the service productivity into a tangible thing. How many cars were rented based on cars available? It is, if it's a sales job, right? Looking at your output in that way. How do you improve productivity? Well, you have to develop the measurements to be productive, right? How are you actually going to measure productivity? Because then you know where you stand, how things were. Are you trending up or trending down? Figure out where in your operations you're looking. You find these bottlenecks where things crawl to a halt. If things are, if you look at a bottle, it's got the bottleneck, right? So that's process flows, and then there's a certain place where, hey, this is holding us up. If this was designed better, we could get more units out. Develop methods for improving your productivity. If you identify where the productivity is lacking, you can improve upon those. Your goals should be reasonable. If your goals are absurd, then your measurements are going to look bad because you expect so many units to be produced, but that's not a reasonable goal, right? Make it clear that you support and encourage productivity improvement. So maybe having some sort of reward in place for people who come up with good ideas that improve productivity. Measure those improvements and publicize them. Praise your team when they have these things, and reward them. Not just a attaboy, but something tangible, bonuses, profit sharing. And then again, don't confuse productivity with efficiency. They're both important, but productivity is more units in the same amount of time. Efficiency would be same amount of units in less time. All right, that's it for chapter 2. There is a separate video on the chapter 2 solve problems / practice problems. The book calls them solve problems. We'll go through those to show you how to figure out the quantitative elements of this chapter, both with pen and paper and your calculator, and completing them on Excel. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next chapter.